Hi, friends. This is Wendy Harrop, and welcome to the Say Yes to Yourself podcast. On the Say Yes to Yourself podcast, you'll hear stories from women just like us who are adding the practice of saying yes in their daily lives in big and small ways, and as a result, are experiencing the truth that everybody wins when you say yes to yourself. Saying yes to yourself is a graceful unfolding, an intentional becoming of the very best version of you. It is my hope that in these conversations, we are able to find our truth and be inspired and empowered to live our very best lives. I'm so excited to go on this journey with you, and I look forward to finding a bit of our own story in each other's. Hello, friends. Welcome back to the podcast. I am so excited that you're here. And I am so excited that the weather is warming up here in Bolton, Massachusetts. And that means that the grass is turning green and the leaves are starting to pop out on these trees that feel like they have been bare for a really long time. It's such a beautiful time of year here. I'm always so amazed at how this property really is alive. And along with it, there are some chores that time is of the essence to get them taken care of. But I am so happy that I can just pop my headphones in and listen to great conversations like the one you're about to hear today. And it helps make the chores and the day just go by with a smile on my face and in my heart. Today's conversation is no different. You are going to love my friend Nichole Lee. She is wonderful and wise and brilliant, and her voice is just, it's like medicine. It's soothing and comforting, and she's bringing so much truth in such a beautiful way that you can implement it with ease and grace, just the way that she offers it with ease and grace. So I'm really excited for you to listen to her wisdom today and have some takeaways and something that you can implement into your daily routine. And that said, if you do, and if you listen to this episode and you love it, would you take a screenshot and share it in your Instagram stories or tag us or do both? We would love to know that you listened, that you enjoyed it. And I would personally love to know what your takeaways are. But a little bit more about Nichole. Nichole Lee is known for being a gifted, heart-centered, multi-modality healer, advisor, coach, and strategic visionary who helps high achievers and change makers radically transform their lives, transcending the identity they feel shackled to. After 20 years working with Fortune 500 companies globally on major transformation and leadership initiatives, Nichole made a bold move to leave her corporate world behind and devote her life to helping high achievers, change makers, and positive disruptors achieve beyond what they ever imagined was possible. Through her work, Nichole helps her clients see who they truly are, uncover and overcome past pain, and break free from outside influences holding them back from reaching their fullest potential in all aspects of their lives. Nichole holds a Master's of Science in Instructional Systems, Bachelor of Science in Psychology, is a certified personal, executive, health, and spiritual coach, hypnotherapist, meditation and mindfulness facilitator, and multi-modality energy healer. And if that were not enough, she is also a brand new podcaster. Her Transcending Identity podcast launched in March, and I'm so excited for her. And I can't wait for you to listen to this conversation and then go on and listen to her new podcast, Transcending Identity. We'll put links in the show notes for all of these beautiful things, but I cannot wait for you to have a little Nichole Lee in your life. Enjoy. Nichole Lee, my beautiful queen, I am so excited to see your gorgeous face and to have this conversation. Thank you for being here.
Wendy, I'm so excited to be here and see your gorgeous face, and I'm so appreciative for this opportunity.
Oh, thank you. So Nichole and I met at a beautiful retreat in Naples, Florida in, I guess, August of 2022, I think.
I think so.
Okay,
yeah.
Good. Something in the summer. It was hot. My hair was curly. And I loved that introduction. I loved your energy. I loved everything that you are up to. And ever since, I've been so excited to have this conversation. So what I would love to know is, how are you saying yes to yourself in this season?
Oh, wow. So many thoughts come to mind. I would say one of the biggest things for me of saying yes to myself is truly being unapologetic of all the elements of myself and how they show up, how I express myself, how I just navigate the world. Being on this journey for some time of just greater exploration and discovery of myself, I recognize, and actually when I met you, Wendy, we talked a bit about it, a fear of truly stepping into my own spotlight, right? And being very comfortable with all the facets of myself. I found that I was very good at, I would say, adapting and morphing as needed. But what I've recognized is that wasn't always in my greatest and highest self. Many times I adjusted who I was for the sake of wanting to be liked or understood or validated. And as a result, wasn't truly in my divine essence when doing that. And so I'm truly saying yes to me. And that's what I'm so excited. And that may come in so many different shapes, forms, and elements, but I am truly comfortable in this beautiful skin that God has given me.
That is so beautiful. And thank you for sharing a part of that journey, because I'm reminded of Mark Groves quote. I think Mark Groves or Mark Graves, that he talks about two of our human needs are authenticity and belonging.
Yes.
And when belonging is threatened, we trade authenticity in exchange for belonging. He says it much more eloquently than that. But
that was beautiful. That was beautiful the way it was. Yes.
But I love how you were saying that, we can be likened to a chameleon and just turn the color of the room that we're in because we're peacemakers, or we're loving, and we're godly, and we're humble, and we're servants, and we're all of these words that we can say that actually make us feel validated in our own self-abandonment. And nobody can change that for us but us.
Yes.
Because nobody knows what's going on inside of us but us.
Yes. And the thing I love is that you brought up the chameleon, because it's something that I've spoken about quite a bit as well. I said that I transitioned from being a chameleon that needs to survive to a chameleon that thrives. And what I mean by that is, to adapt, to flex, to be able to morph, to be able to go into spaces and adjust your energy or your presence, right? Say you don't necessarily wear a bathing suit to a ski, to a ski resort, etc. So we adjust and morph and adapt. However, there's so much of that that's driven by survival, right? That I'm seeing something that may be a threat and I want to adjust myself to feel fitting in or belonging at a greater desire need than me being comfortable in myself. And so I find that I am a chameleon. I am able to go into so many different environments, and I'm very grateful for that. However, I'm doing it from this thriving service energy, right? I may
Yes.
adjust the way I dress or my hair or even how I speak, more so from this space of service and thriving, not because I'm trying to fit in or that I'm afraid that I won't be accepted. And so I think there's some beauty in the chameleon. It's asking ourselves what is driving us to make those adjustments, right?
Right.
And how we actually feel at the core of us, what it means to us. So I love that you mentioned that, because it's something that I leverage that particular animal as questioning why I'm morphing. Why am I shifting in some way? And do I feel good about it? And if I do, then
Right.
that's where I'm going.
Right. Well, that's amazing because I don't even know how I thought of that animal.
That's
So
because we're
I love
connected, Wendy.
I love that. Yes, we are. And as is everybody listening, because that's how it is. So I'm really interested in knowing then, how do you have a practice that you use to help you check in to know when you are using your chameleon superpower as, in fact, a superpower, or where it becomes your kryptonite? How are you able to decide, okay, I've turned enough colors in this room and this is the color I'm staying, even though it looks like something's turning a corner here that's no longer in alignment for me?
Yeah, I would say overall, I've really focused on a ritual getting back in my body.
Ooh, say more.
I find that we have been taught more so to disembody. And what I mean by that is we can have certain feelings, even things of your heart rate increasing, right? Certain physiological things that are happening in our body that sometimes we overlook or we've been taught to
Mm.
suppress. So I ask myself, why? But I also sit in my body. Does this feel good? Right. And if I start feeling something different in my body, I then even ask myself, is it more because I'm nervous or anxious or excited? What's driving, the rumbles in my tummy or the palpitations in my chest? And what I've come to find is I get a pretty clear answer. And many times I do this with my eyes closed. So what happens
Mm.
a lot of times is we're overstimulated by things around us, what we hear, what we see, right? There's all kinds of stuff. Even, when we're talking with people, sometimes we can get distracted by trying to connect to them. So I've actually started closing my eyes and going within and asking these questions. And I
Wow.
think this is also where we get more connected to our inner knowing. Some people call that your inner wisdom with God or source or your intuition. But many times we have the answer inside of us. We've just been taught to go outside of us. So
Right.
that's what I've started doing, and just becoming more curious, asking why. Like, why do I want that? Why do I want to even wear the dress or the earrings, or why do I want to be in this group with certain people, and how am I feeling about it?
Oh, that's such a beautiful practice. And I think, so many thoughts came to my mind. And funnily enough, as much as I love that practice,
Hmm.
I was thinking of, well, how could I possibly add that? Like, I live on a small farm, or if someone's listening and like, I'm busy at work,
Hmm.
or I have a family to take care of, or I have all of these things. And I think that there are so many reasons to not do this, and there's only one reason to do this, and it is a giant yes to yourself. And just like I always say, and I say in the introduction to this podcast, everybody wins
Yes.
when we say yes to ourselves. And sometimes I can think, well, I can't let all of my chores and responsibilities suffer by doing this practice. It will take me away from the things, but it is really the practice that helps me fully show up for all of those people and all of those things, including me.
Yes, it's so beautiful. And what you share, Wendy, is so powerful as well, of just acknowledging that it may take time to get to a place that there's pure comfort in doing this in all of the elements of your life. And also recognizing, acknowledging that anything that does not feel comfortable, we can convince ourselves that we don't have the time for it to occur. And that's actually a way for our bodies to remain safe, right? So we have this beautiful intelligence inside of us that is really trying to keep us from going into spaces that don't feel safe. And so what I would recommend for someone who's like, I have the chores, I have a family, I have a demanding job, I came from that world in consulting 24/7, right, on the clock. I would say start small. Small is big, right? So
Right?
if you are making your cup of coffee, if you're a coffee person, I'm a tea person, right? Just putting the water in the kettle or the pot or however you do that, taking that moment to take a deep breath and just center and say, why? If there's something on your mind, or why am I going to that party this evening, or that work event, or if you're on a beautiful farm, right, when you're feeding the animals, or your beautiful garden, just taking that moment of thinking of something, setting that intention of asking that question, right? I think just in this busy, crazy, overstimulated world, it becomes more challenging to actually feel like being still, even for 60 seconds, is actually a good thing, right? So that's just something that I've found for myself, but also recommended to clients. If you had 5 more minutes, could you wake up 5 more minutes earlier? Or could you jump off that meeting that's supposed to be 60 minutes, 55, and take the 5 minutes to sit with yourself and reflect, or ask why, or take a deep breath, or pull out a beautiful picture you have of someone you love. But those are just some of the things that come to mind when you were saying, because it's very natural for that to happen.
I love that. And I love how practical that is. And I love how it can so quickly, just in what you were saying, I was imagining that routine and how quickly the why can turn to gratitude.
Yes, yes. Mm-hmm.
And how even if your why reminds you how gorgeous whatever it is you're doing is, or if your why reminds you, I used to enjoy this and
Now I
now I
don't.
don't, and I would like to make another choice now. Like, there's gratitude in that, because we all have agency and we all have permission to change our minds.
Yes.
To be doing something for a really long time, and it doesn't mean that we need to keep doing it if it's no longer filling our heart and no longer in service to us.
Yeah. And I love that you mentioned, Wendy, too, how why can be such a good thing, right?
Yes.
And it makes me think about children, right? When they ask why out of curiosity
Yes.
and clarity and exploration. Well, why is that? And what is this? And, and for some reason, this wonderful world that we live in starts to tell us as adults that the only time we ask why is maybe from a negative, why are you doing this? Right. The judgment, which once again creates a visceral response in our bodies that says it's not safe to ask yourself why. That means you don't know, or you should know, or you should have figured it out, or, those types of things. So I love what you said of looking at why as a place of discovery, exploration, and gratitude. Why did I do that? Right. Being an observer of the why, not a judger of the why. And so
Right.
I love that you say that, because it's like, why am I doing that? Oh, because I've been doing it for 15 years. Oh, it's just become a pattern. Do I really want to do that? Why, no, I don't. Okay. How comfortable am I in making the shift? Not so comfortable. Okay, cool. Maybe I won't do it tomorrow, but what are the steps I'll take to start on that path? Right. So I think the other thing is, we've heard that kind of, peeling the onion per se, right? Or unpacking the bag, or whatever metaphor works for you. But it can be those small, beautiful questions in a way of love and compassion they allow you to open up more to the possibilities of actually shifting those things that don't feel good to you anymore.
Right. And without the worry of, well, if I don't do this, who's going to do it?
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
obviously, nobody else is going to do it because they would have already been helping me.
Yep.
We can go down the rabbit hole, and we're actually robbing other people of the opportunity to do the thing that might be more in alignment for them.
Yes, for sure.
And if it's not in alignment for you and it's not in alignment for anybody else, how important is the actual task?
Very true.
So I think that why is it's like a shovel that is just digging to more discovery. And where are we going to get to the treasure chest?
I love that.
That is the answer to that why.
When you were saying, I literally heard treasure, and like, so this is the beautiful thing, I think, right? Like, align to something that I go back to the feeling, because we may be using the treasure chest, right? Wendy, let's dig up new treasures, right? Or unpacking. If I'm big into traveling, so me thinking about unpacking my bag, and sometimes I'm like, why the heck did I pack that thing? You unpack it, right? You're like, it's time to go. Goodwill consignment. Right. I don't know, but it's no longer here. But at the same time, you may find things that you love, but just the fact of connecting to something that resonates with you is where we're going, right? So if it's digging the treasure or unpacking the bag or reorganizing your space or leaning in, I think the other thing too is we've become so conditioned to using language that may not be good for us, or use, and trying to go about making these shifts by using something that was for somebody else. So to your point, right, even asking, is this aligned to me? Would I use different words or language that would make me feel more excited about doing it? When you mentioned digging up treasure, I got excited. I don't even use that, but I'm like, I'm ready to go digging. Like, what am I going to find? Right. And it might look all dirty and, old, but I pull it up and I shine it off and I find something beautiful inside of it. And I might find something it's time for it to be thrown away. I didn't even realize it was still that, still with me.
Right.
So I just think it's really beautiful, Wendy, that, that visualization, I think, is so important for us as women as well, of even amplifying that creative element in us. And from my experience, right, working in corporate America for over 20 years in consulting and being tied to very more what I would say masculine energy, very target driven, goal driven, balancing your emotions, especially as women, right? If we're over emotional, whatever we want to call it, I'm using the air quotes, right? That I found that I wasn't leaning into that intuitive energy, the creative space, right? The visionary space, the flow space. So I think also as us as women, we all have different roles. So you may be in more of that creative space. But for those who have been struggling or challenged with that, I think this is a great opportunity to start to bring some of that play or creativity back into your life. You may find with the why that drawing or doodling helps expand that, right? Or speaking about it versus journaling. But I think the thing is what we've talked about is leaning into something that feels good to you and starting there, right? It helps to then be able to get to some of the bigger, tougher things that still may be on your list.
I love that. And I love just the beautiful, short trigger reminder of the word why.
Yeah.
I have a bit longer mantra that I started operating in a couple of years ago, that I am only available for what delights me.
Love that.
And that has been my question when someone asks if I can do something or if something is tasked to me, then I can ask myself, does that delight me? No, that does not. So no, thank you. And I can pass on it. It feels as if I'm, like asking my parents if I have permission to do the thing. Like I'm asking myself, and I'm letting delight be the filter of what I say yes to and what I say no thank you to. And it feels so good because I'm not shunning my responsibilities to people or to the needs of my property. Having the property and having the friends delight me. So if I
Yes.
need to have a courageous conversation with somebody, if I have to take someone, drive them to the doctor, like it doesn't delight me that they need a doctor, but their friendship delights me. If I need to clean the chicken coop, of course, shoveling manure does not delight me, but having chickens and a compost bin and gorgeous flowers and beautiful eggs that are all because I clean out the chicken coop, that delights me. So there can be a task associated that might give us a little bit of a check, and we can ask that why. But when it's in service to us from a higher elevation, a bigger, as you pan out, you can see that this actually is in service to the direction I'm going, however I'm performing in my career, however I'm being as a woman, as a person in community, as a person in my family, that it's in service to that, and it can go through that grid. And the things that aren't, they just aren't. And we don't have to bend ourselves into a pretzel so that we can say yes to everything, because it will make it easier for other people, and making things easier for other people is what delights us. That's going to require another why.
Yes. And I love that you brought up being in service, because I think back to when we just started this and the whole piece of me moving into fully embodying, right, what I call divine genius, which is, outside of what the world may see as these things, but something I feel is divinely implanted in me. What I didn't add that you mentioned that I love is part of what drove me to that was to be of service, right? So the why also includes, are you doing this to be of service? If you're not, then what is behind that, right? So me being my multifaceted self is not just so Nichole, I'm talking about myself in third person, right? Just to be out here in the world living her best life, right? Which is part of it. But if
Right.
I'm not doing these things and I'm not being of service, if I'm not showing a certain side of myself that I believe is part of the service, then I'm not being of service. And to add to that, and I think what's really powerful is you get to decide, and this is what you were saying, everything that I've gone through in my life may be important, but it may not be of service, or I feel is of service to the world. So I may hold on to that, or I may find that it will be of service, but I get to decide when that part of me will show up. And I think this is the other part too, right? That as we go through this journey of unbecoming things, becoming things, reconnecting to things, that we still get to decide how much of the outside world or even people that we love are part of that. And I think sometimes it could be very difficult. And I know for me, that was something that was difficult for me, right? As I start to unpack so many things, how much of this do I really have to share, right? How much of it is necessary, or I believe necessary, tied to my calling to share? And so I think as you start to go through that journey, the questions get a little bit deeper, and you start to gain a little bit more comfort and confidence in making those decisions. And so I continue on that journey of what I want to share now and what may be shared later, but being very comfortable in my skin of making that decision and creating those boundaries. Because the other thing, as we know, as you start to make yourself more available, there are more questions that people have, or they may start doing their own little searching of information, So I think that's just something in that journey of agency that you mentioned is important for us to consider as women and be honored by that and be supported in that as well.
That's so interesting that you mentioned the people that are on their own treasure hunt, but to see how they can expose what you're doing just because you haven't given access to every corner of your life. Like, that's not even the role, but I think it's so fascinating. I recently shared with my podcast audience what's happening with the change in my marital status. And, I originally thought, okay, I'm going to wait until everything is resolved and there's a settlement in place, and then I can speak, and I'll be speaking from a scar instead of a wound, and that will be so much better. And it's taking a long time. And I just felt like, ooh, I actually don't feel like I am completely showing up, because this is a major life event and it is impacting my life. And I desire community and support around me as I move through this moment in time. And so that's why I shared. And I found it so fascinating, the difference between, in responses, the difference between curiosity and care. So the people that reached out and said, oh my goodness, thank you for sharing that. You're so brave. I'm thinking of you. And then the people that say, what happened? And it's so different. Curiosity is so different than care on the ears of the person in need. And I was listening to Glennon Doyle's podcast, We Can Do Hard Things, and they were chatting about this in a similar situation, and how when we're asked what happened, that sometimes that is from a place of, well, I need to know, to see on a scale how likely that is to happen to me. So I want to know, like, if you hear someone died, you can either send the family condolences, or you can say, oh my gosh, what happened? Because you want to know, well, that person smoked. Okay, so that's not going to happen to me. Or that person drove too fast and that's not going to happen to me. Or that person cheated on her husband and that's not going to happen to me. Whatever, like there's almost, well, it makes it more about the person asking instead of the person that you are wanting to care for. And I think it's really important, as you mentioned so many times, Nichole, to go back to that motivation, to that intention, to the answer to that why. Why am I asking this question? Is it because I really care about that person and I'm thinking of them? Or am I trying to get more information to see where I line up and how I might avoid a similar circumstance? I actually had a person message me on Instagram before the podcast aired that shared that information, asking me, did you recently become a single mother? Because you don't ever talk about your husband and you don't wear a wedding ring. And that was it. And she doesn't follow me. She just like came in and asked me that question. And I just thought, wow, I didn't respond because that's the right thing.
That was your boundary, right?
Do not
that
engage.
Was your boundary.
Do not engage. But I wanted to say, if I had responded, this is what I would have said. Oh my gosh, thank you for reaching out. I think what you meant to say is, I've noticed you're not wearing a wedding ring, and I just want you to know that I'm thinking of you and I support you. Like, instead of trying to solve some mystery that I wasn't trying to hide from anybody, I wasn't trying to, be inauthentic. It was just something that was happening to me. So I just think that our words are powerful, and our intentions are real. And I think that it's really important to acknowledge our intentions and make sure that our words are really in alignment for our desired outcome.
Yeah. And there's a few things that, as I'm listening to you, right, of one, just like we were saying too, of like, I can create whatever boundary and I can communicate what I want to or not want to, regardless of how visible or appeared available I am perceived. And I think that, right, like that's one, I think particularly that, and I love the way you articulate it, because that was where I was, right? Of as I make myself more available or visible to strangers, right? Like, I mean,
Right.
people we don't know or whatever the case is. What does that boundary look like? Will I be responsive, reactive, whatever that looks like? And where you were in your space too is, this space of peace that I heard from you talking of, I don't have to respond. I don't have to react. I can create whatever world I choose. And it's okay if they've created whatever vision or perspective or perception of me that they have, right? Like huge. The other thing that's very fascinating too, that you mentioned around that curiosity or the questioning or inquiring compared to starting with the compassion and care is that part of awareness, right? So I think what we've even talked about is like, the more I'm aware of what's having me even navigate or operate, the more I can recognize what the intention or motivation is, right?
Yeah.
And it may very well be, oh my gosh, that happened, or I think that might happen to me. However, sitting with it, how I present myself, right? How I communicate with another person is what changes. And I think that is what's powerful, because I still may be concerned, but the compassion and care will come first, right?
Yes.
That then can lead to the other opportunities, because what we don't sometimes realize, we're arming people. If I'm coming with that, we just talked about the body feeling like it's a threat. That's a threat.
Right.
I'm attacked, right? Like whether that's illogical or not, the body's like, this is an attack. Shut down, right? So I just think that awareness of us recognizing that, and I do think this element of just pure compassion too, that I sense from even not responding to that person, is recognizing and like reframing what you said, of recognizing that person wasn't in that space. That's something, and this is what I've continued to work on. None of us were born with this desire to hurt other people, right? To attack other people, to say things that are going to hurt people. Along this beautiful journey of life we've been on, we've all experienced some painful things. And some of us have had the opportunity to really unpack some of them, right? To have support and care to navigate those things in a way that allows us to recognize where we're hurting ourselves and even other people. And so I've really tried to do my very best to keep that in mind if and when individuals present themselves in a way that doesn't feel good, right? Because I recognize something in them doesn't feel good.
Mm-hmm.
I have to believe that someone in their essence of feeling whole and healed and loved wouldn't communicate with me that way, And so that's something that continues to take some work, but I sit in that. And I also we've talked about gratitude. I think the other thing is forgiveness. I have spent so much time forgiving myself of things that I held on to that made it difficult for me to forgive other people.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because as I say, how I feel about myself is in how I will feel about others.
Right.
So I know we were talking about that situation, but I do think it comes full circle of helping with the level of compassion as well, because there's forgiveness in that process that doesn't necessarily mean that the person isn't accountable, right? So I can forgive without even speaking with you in my heart and for you, but also hold you accountable for your not so great behavior,
Right.
And I think like, I'm just thinking about that person in your sending you that message, like already could sense and feel where you were going with that. I'm not holding on to that. I forgive myself and you, whatever might have been the process in that. And I can send you compassion, but I can hold you accountable by not responding.
Right.
Because I'm not going to put fuel in a fire that you're trying to start.
Exactly. And if this was one of the people that I just consider in my community, that we are in conversation, we've never met, we talk on Instagram, we are 100% friends, even though we have not met and have only communicated on Instagram. There are many women in my community that I've curated socially that could have asked me those questions, and I would have probably even read them with a different intention, because they've already invested in me and I've invested in them. And for it to be from a person who that hasn't made it, that she's made no deposits. So to start with a withdrawal, there's your account is in arrears, and I am not, your ATM card is not working. So you will not get anything back out of this, because there were no deposits.
Man, Wendy, you bring up another thing too, about like an overflow in a sense, right? Like, I'm not going to keep letting individuals withdraw from me, right? And we wonder why there's been times we've been so exhausted, because I love that, right? I've been the human ATM. It doesn't always mean that it's financial. It's the energy, it's the emotion, it's the time, it's all of those things. And it is important, right, that there's some level of investment, right? A level of reciprocity. It may not be, it's not about it being even in some sense, but it's recognizing that we live in this space of giving and receiving. And I found, just even listening to you, that's where I was depleted. I was doing way more giving without receiving, without recognizing how it wasn't allowing me to show up as my best self, right? And so we can sometimes get caught up in the service so much that we do a disservice to ourselves in the process.
Yeah.
And I love that example you used was like, I'm going to be of service of me first. And this is a boundary. This does not delight me. And I'm not going to go in this direction. Right. And just from that energy shift, people are very aware where they stand. And I think another thing that just from listening and kind of talking through this is sometimes we don't have to, our non-reaction is the action. Like, we don't always have to say something for someone to recognize where we stand.
Right. And I love what you said earlier, Nichole. You have a selection of experiences and information, pieces of information about you that are available to the public.
Right.
And for example, just because I put my address on Instagram and show pictures inside and outside of my house, and I take people to my garden and you're on the lawnmower with me and we're making a cocktail in the kitchen and all of these things. And yes, I've invited you in. I have invited you in, and I'm so happy you're here. At the end of the party, you're going to need to go home. It's like, it's not just because I'm put myself out there on Instagram that now I'm not allowed to have a boundary, or that I am misrepresenting. If my dreamy barn life, my hashtag dreamy barn life, if there's an area of it that it's not perfect or dreamy, that I'm misrepresenting because I'm only showing the dreamy stuff. Well, yeah, of course I'm only showing the dreamy stuff. You don't want to see, but I'm not ever saying that there isn't other things. I love my life. I'm grateful for my life. There are lots of things that are not Instagram worthy, and I'm not going to put them there because I actually don't, the access to that space is a smaller circle, and I get to decide who's in that circle for me. Not that anyone's saying that any of that's happening, but it's just a decision that I get to make for me.
Yeah. And it's like, I get to choose what's sacred, right? Like, that's what came to me for like, And just because I invite you into my house doesn't mean you have access to every room, right? So I just think that the other thing too of the exposing different parts of us is still a decision. And like you say, like if mine is the dreamy life and the like that's my decision and my choice. And just because I'm not inviting you into other areas of my world does not make me fake.
That's right.
Right? It does not make me disingenuine or inauthentic. I'm choosing that, and I'm choosing who has access to that. Right. And I think also as people in business now, if I'm a self-love coach and I'm not talking about elements of going through that journey, or that's a different story, because where I'm focused in and I'm talking about vulnerability, there may be a need to show some vulnerable aspects. In the work that I do, I had to lean in and say, there are some elements of vulnerability that will be necessary that I will need to share, because if I'm talking about being all of you and I'm not sharing where I wasn't all of me,
right,
there's an inconsistency there. However, I still get to choose in what aspects of my life. I'll go back to the house, right? I may not decide to open a room for you to see. I may decide to share in this space. And so I think that's what's so empowering is you still decide what is open to people and what is closed to people. Right? In any part. And I mean, I use a self-love coach because I used to define myself that. So just honoring those who do that work and, recognizing that was necessary if I was going to serve. I think it goes back to what level of service. However, it still means or meant that I get to choose where that is displayed, where it's shared. And I love that, like, even when we talk about these sacred spaces, I may decide to share in smaller circles.
right.
I may versus broader ones. I may decide to do it with friends, family, whatever the case is. I think that freedom is the word that comes to me to be reminded of is I am free to decide what that is. And I think, Wendy, too, that you and I have been on a similar journey of I also need to ensure that I have people who respect, who support, and who are aligned to that. Because I think as we're talking, where some of the challenges have been for me and, friends I know and clients I've worked with is not having that support, whether it's a community, whether it's part of a cohort, whether that's close friends that you really feel that you can start being free.
Right.
It becomes very suffocating, debilitating at times, and also very lonely if you don't have that. I think that's so important.
It is identified as weakness to need others. And that's just a lie. It's a lie. And please don't believe that lie anymore, because there is strength and there's camaraderie. And what is most personal is most universal. And you are not the only person, sweet listener, that is going through something hard. And you have agency to curate the community that you desire, the community that delights you, and to be available to that community and to make yourself available and known to that community as well. And in the process, grow and heal and rise together, and you'll never be the same in the best way possible.
Yeah. And I would add to that too. These are the spaces where it may feel overwhelming. And so even finding the one person to start with, if that person's a therapist, a counselor, a coach, some extension of something, because I think of some people who have been in environments where they did take the full leap and they were hurt by it. Right. And so for those of you who've said, you know what, I've tried the communities, I've tried the cohorts, I've tried a group, I tried all different types of things, and it didn't feel good. And it's part of the reason why I'm to myself now, right? I would invite you to perhaps sit, and if there's that one person that can be there for you to help you start opening up. And many times that for people, it is a therapist, or, if you're part of a church or something, someone that you have some level of trust, and starting to rebuild that ability and desire to be vulnerable, to be open, and to start to expand to the levels of community. And I feel for you deeply, because that's where I think it also becomes challenging to do some of the things we talked about today. So if you've had individuals close to you that have told you you can't, or you're weak, or, the creative side of you will never make you money, or never make you happy, or you're not smart enough, or whatever it is, many of the things of what we believe about ourselves is because someone said it to us, right? And we believed it because it came from someone that had enough connection to us that we trusted the words that they said. So I just acknowledge women, all people who are in that space, to continue to be resilient and have the courage to try again. And so, I'll just reiterate, finding the one, and even if it's calling an 800 hotline, or there are many around, there's a crisis text line that you can text out to, just to start feeling seen, heard, and loved by someone, to start rebuilding that inside of yourself, I think is also important to share.
That's beautiful. Thank you for that invitation. Now, Nichole, you mentioned that you were calling yourself, identifying as a self-love coach. And are you transitioning from that, or what are you up to? What goodness are you up to? What if someone says, I want Nichole to be my person? What would that look like?
Yes. And so I've gone through several different iterations of what I call myself, which
Welcome to the club, queen.
Yeah. And that's the other thing, right? Reinvention, recreation, evolution, whatever your word, transmutation, manifestation, all of them.
I just heard someone say she's not calling it a midlife crisis. She's calling it a midlife chrysalis.
Yes, a chrysalis. I love it. Whatever that is for you. So, through this evolution, and just to back up a bit, so I mentioned being in corporate for some time. So I was in business management consulting for 20 plus years, traveling the world, supporting large scale transformations for organizations and people, and took the leap into going into coaching, healing work. And so through that evolution, as I was learning to love myself more, I focused on being a self-love coach, right? It just felt very much aligned. As I continue to evolve and grow and learn and expand, I've recognized that really what I provide is safe spaces for individuals. And so when we get in a space of safety, then our body, our mind, our spirit can be disarmed, that we can get into exploration and discovery of who we are, and start to unfold or unpack, right? Or find the treasures in ourselves to get back to who we are at our core essence. And so I am now positioning myself, and what I am out in the world, I'm a confidant, advisor, and strategist. And what that means is I'm a safe space for us to have conversation, right? And what I found is many of my clients are high performing, celebrity, certain backgrounds where performing or being the thing is always what everybody wants from them. And so having a safe space just to be is what they desire. With that though, I have some tools and I have some skills. So if you need advice, right, or you need support and strategy and figuring out what that looks like for your life, your business, your career, I provide that as part of that, right? If you need someone to support you in healing from an energy healing perspective, mindfulness, I support that. So that is what I'm up to now. I've expanded how I support, and that includes things like self-love, right? But that's just one element of what I provide.
Oh, I love that.
Thank you.
And you have a podcast about to launch and
Yes.
all sorts of goodness. How can people find out more about that, about working with you? Where would you like people to find you?
Yes. So my website is probably the easiest to find out about me and all the things that we're talking about, including the podcast. So that's www.Nichole, Nichole.love. Yes, the extension is love.
Well, that's so much
Yeah,
better
then
than
.com.
.com.
That's what that's
I
the
might need to switch to a
there are
.love
so
too.
many things now that, the expansiveness of .com it's exploded with the internet. So yeah, so that's where you can find me. I'm on Instagram, and I think we'll share, in the show notes, but
Yes.
Instagram and LinkedIn and Twitter and all those good things. But really the website, that's where there'll also be information about the podcast, which is called Transcending Identity. So it's basically us talking about how we transform, how we pivot, and we release ourselves from the shackles of certain identities that would have kept us bound. So I'm looking forward to that and all the beautiful stories that will be shared.
Oh, so
Yeah.
exciting. Oh my goodness. I have loved this conversation, Nichole. Thank you so much for your time,
Thank you,
for
Wendy.
your wisdom, for your generosity. You are a gift.
You are a gift as well, Wendy, and I'm so grateful that we met. I'm inspired and motivated by you, your story, your essence of who you are. And I know that what you do is a blessing, and I appreciate being a blessing upon others, but you being a blessing in my life. So thank you.
Thank you. I received that. You're a treasure. I'll see you soon.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. As always, any links or notes mentioned can be found at phineaswrighthouse.com in the podcast section of our site or in the show notes below. And if you haven't connected with me personally, come find me on Instagram at Phineas Wrighthouse and let me know you listened to this episode. I'd love to get to know you. Thank you for sharing this time with me. I know your days are full, and I'm really grateful that you chose to spend some of your precious time right here. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any of these delightful conversations. I'll see you next week.